Now we are resuming the interview with my parents. It's still Monday, not Monday, no, it's March 20th. It's not Monday at all, it's Friday.
Yeah.
And we were at the point where my father had gotten in the taxi to leave. You hadn't seen your mother yet, though.
Okay,
No.
then tell that first.
Well, it's by that time it was dark, and there were more and more ashes in the headlights of the car, and because the lights were on again because one had surrendered. We were near Woerden, it's halfway to Gouda, when we were met by a column of army trucks, and they stopped us. We all stopped, and they said, "Where are you going?" I said,
Was it Dutch Army or German?
Dutch.
Okay.
And so they were going in the direction of Utrecht, where the front, they thought. So we said, "There is no front, Holland has surrendered." And said, "Well, we didn't hear anything about this." I said, "Well, that's the way it is."
Mm.
So we went on, and then close to Gouda, I saw a bright orange glow on the horizon, and later understood that was Rotterdam, had just been bombed, and that's where the ashes came from. I asked the driver to stop by Gouda, the house where my parents still were, to say goodbye to them. So he did, and I had a key, so I got in and went upstairs to my parents' bedroom and knocked on the door, and my father said no, and my mother said yes, so I went in. She had put my passport ready and about 200 guilders, I think, to take along, in case I would ever think of doing this.
When did she actually put that aside? Do you know?
Probably during the night when Holland surrendered.
Mm.
So I did say goodbye. There's now a plaque on that house saying this is the house where I said goodbye to my parents escaping from the Nazis.
Yeah. But your brother had already left.
My brother and his wife, shortly after getting married, went to Palestine.
In January.
So it's a few months before that. And
Yeah.
he went as a student, or was it
No,
part of the
he's not-
Zionist movement?
Scientist.
No, he went...
Zionist or scientist?
Both.
Uh-huh.
They had offered him a job, but they had not told him there was no salary.
Well, it was still under the British at
Mhm.
the time, and the British had very strict rules for people moving in, and one was that they had to have a job, and also that they had to have a security amount of money, so that in case anything happened, it would not be at the the responsibility of the state. So he had the job. He didn't know that he didn't have salary.
Mm-hmm.
And Leo's parents had sent a sizable amount of money, but they thought that was, safe money that would just be there and be assurance. But it turned out that they had to live on that.
Oh, okay.
And later, maybe I should tell that now,
Yeah.
when Sapta Leo's mother,
Mhm.
moved to Israel after being liberated from the camps, she knew that she had that money there, but when she came, there was no money.
Mm-hmm.
And so Uncle Jaap promised her that she would always have a place in
Mhm.
their home.
Yeah.
And then even later, the girls, the daughter said, "Why did Sapta stay with us all the time?"
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
They
know.
said, "You didn't know that, did you?"
Mm-hmm.
No, we didn't know.
So I left Gouda, went on west to Den Haag, The Hague, and I found the address of a friend of ours, asked her for directions to Scheveningen, which is the coast, and then the harbor, you could say. So the taxi left, and the taxi had another passenger that we picked up somewhere who had escaped from Rotterdam during the bombing. He was a soldier. So anyway, I walked on, probably for a long time, but I had no sense of time. And I got to the pier of Scheveningen, where I could just about see a group of people standing together talking. And so I joined them, and it turned out they were trying to buy a boat from a fisherman. So one guy said, well, you can't join us unless you pay. So I said, I have money. So I paid them quite a bit. And then I said, well, the ship is, the boat is in the other harbor. So we all paid $10 for a ride to the other harbor, but it wasn't. So first they wanted to charge another $10, 10 guilders going back, but they took us back. We got the ship, or the boat, and we sailed off.
It was a sailboat, or
Yes, it was a sailboat called the Emma, and it had a full sail. And one of the fishermen said he would guide us, stay on board. But as we went along the pier, he jumped off, and we were on our own. But there's one man who was, I think, a sergeant who took over. We got a loaf of bread for 10 guilders. And we sailed, but there was hardly any wind. So when dawn came, it looked as if we hadn't moved at all. But after a while, there was a trawler coming at us. Meanwhile, I had been the lookout for mines. I was at the bow, falling asleep, and waking up again and seeing no mines. The trawler was also escaping. It had one passenger on board and two crew, I think. And we abandoned the sailboat and got on the trawler, and during the night, in a kind of stormy weather, we went to Harwich, England. Several fellow passengers, I must say, on our sailboat were German people who had escaped from Germany and now were escaping again.
Were they all Jews?
Yes. Also, as we were ready to sail off, I could add that there was a man who came running with a briefcase, and he wanted to join us, so he paid and he joined us. And then his wife and his little daughter came running after him. And he said, no women and children. I said, well, please, so he took them. When we arrived in Harwich, the next day there was a newspaper report on how we had arrived, and there was this little girl who kept our courage up by singing folk songs. Actually, she was seasick all the way. So much for... So,
it's much more romantic sounding that way.
Oh yes. Then we were given a place to stay. Also, we were handed a piece of paper in most remarkable Dutch that we were welcome, and there was work for us to do, like cutting wood and so on, but we'll find out later. But they took us, the day after that, they took me and another fellow escapist to London SW6, where we were lodged with a very sweet couple. The man had been in World War I and was still coughing from the gas attacks, and they had a son who who wanted to be a scientist, so I talked a lot with them.
Well, if I can ask a second, so were there other people who had escaped around that time? It sounds like maybe the British were not totally unprepared
Apparently,
for people coming over from Holland.
no, and the Dutch government had already escaped, the Queen and a group of people. And I met a family of father, mother, and 2 daughters, I think, who came from Eemerde. Eemerde is a harbor where there was a lot of traffic, and these were owners of a tugboat company, I think, and they took their own boat. What they did, the man told me, was they were eating. Then they heard Holland had surrendered, so they dropped their forks and knives and left the food on the table and went for their boat. That's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I heard something on the other side. First of all, Leo's mother and I went to Scheveningen because that's what we knew that you would have done. And we met the man who had sold the boat.
Mm.
And he told us, oh, there was no, he had no hopes for us. And listen to this, I threw a loaf of bread into him, and with his other hand taking $10, of course.
Guilders, yeah.
Guilders. And later we heard that Leo and all these people had exactly hit on the maybe 2 or 3 hours that they could do these things because the Germans had not reached the harbors. And if you had waited another hour, you might not have been able to escape. And we heard a couple of days later, so we knew that you had left because he described the group. And then Uncle Leo's uncle, who had business relations in London, was able to find out that you had arrived.
Well, I wrote to Tineka's father in Indonesia, and he wrote back, why don't you come here, you'll be safe and you can finish your studies and get a job. So, and he would take care of the transportation. I had to get a permit because the ship would go via Cape Town. There was a South Africa house in London where I went, and he said, well, you have to get a permit from Singapore first. He said, well, we're not stopping in Singapore. I said, no, it's a formality, you have to get it from Singapore. I went to the Singapore house, or whatever it was called, and they said, no, it depends on the local permission. You have to show that you get Indonesia permits you to enter the country. So I cabled to Tineka's father, and next hour, so I cabled back, permission granted. I went with that to the Dutch government, and I said, how is that possible? No, you just, where did you send the cable from? And he said, right there. Well, okay, and they let me go, and it was only only 2 days left, I think, to catch the ship. So first I went, of course, back to the Singapore house, and from there to the South Africa house to get my permit. And I made it to the train to Southampton, and the ship.
And you bought topical clothes.
One, I could tell you that, you know the story. I had a little money left. I said, well, I should look decently prepared. So I went to a British outfit place that was still open, and I said, what does one wear? Well, he said, you need a pith helmet and a white jacket, I guess. And I already got white pants given to me from a charity person, I think. So I had those ready, and when we sailed west because we had to avoid, if you imagine the bulge of Africa,
Mhm.
but to avoid that because there were German submarines. Then went south, then went east to Cape Town. And there we stayed, I stayed for 10 days to catch the next ship, and met Gresshoff, who was then a very famous poet in Holland, and who had seen the movie You Can't Take It With You when he lived in Holland, so he moved to Belgium, and then he saw the movie again, and he went from Belgium to Cape Town. So that was very inspiring, and it was now August, and then I went on the Rijndam, I think, and there were Portuguese on board who had, while of course the deck was kept dark except for the little blue lights, and they had their guitars and they were singing. See if I can whistle it. No,
I think it'll be hard to pick up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can whistle the songs they play. Well, this is forbidden from two angles. I whistle very well sometimes. Anyway, then when we got near Java, I decided to start wearing my proper outfit. And when I got off the ship, I was greeted by Tinnikus father going, "Leo, how great to see you. Quick, let's get into a taxi." So we got in a taxi, and he said, "The outfit you are wearing is only worn by Indonesian traffic police." So, goodbye piss helmet and other stuff.
And you were so proud of them.
I spent a lot of money on
Yeah.
it.
Well, we heard that you had gone, and also through relations, and I think by
Yeah.
that time we know not yet.
Was written-
Ernst Snapper. Nothing so yeah. Ernst Snapper.
Who wrote
Ernst Snapper. Yeah.
Who wrote as William Dort Heissein?
Nobody did.
Yes, Jaap did.
Well, he may have,
So
but
well,
I
we
didn't know about
totally
that.
agree on everything. Yeah, my parents didn't know where I was, of course. I don't know how Jaap got the news, but Ernst Snapper, who was in the United States, because his father saw things coming, made contact.
Hmm.
And so,
He made
He-
contact with you?
yeah, I don't know what he did, but
in Indonesia?
it turned out that Jaap knew what happened.
Hmm.
And Jaap sent, I think, a telegram to my parents,
No.
to somebody, or a letter, not explaining where I was, but just saying, as Wirtim dort Heissein, he will be hot there.
No, that was an extra thing. We heard the details from Ernst Snapper because there was.
So you heard from Ernst and from Uncle Jaap?
Well, America was not in
Yeah.
war, so
Mhm.
they could write letters.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so basically you heard in little bits and pieces from other people that he was okay. You didn't know exactly where. Did you know that your father had asked him to come there?
Yes, we knew. Well, we knew that you were going to Indonesia. There was only one reason why you would go.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was well known for, rescuing people in
Yeah.
situations. No,
So
I,
what in the
I think
so in the meantime, what was happening? 'Cause, well, you got to Indonesia and basically thought everything was going to be okay for a while.
Yeah.
And this was in August or
yeah,
fall of 1940.
Yes.
And then you finished. What was you finished studies or?
There were a botany professor and a zoology. They were not official professors at the medical college, and
Mm-hmm.
they accepted the idea that I would pass an exam, which through Tineka's father's activity was going to be recognized as equivalent to a doctoral exam passed in Holland in peacetime. It was a royal decree.
Mm-hmm. And then after you passed the exam, you were working there for.
I wrote my diploma
Mm-hmm.
and they signed it.
Oh.
And I worked in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting problem with the students was that they had to draw specimens and write in whatever the parts were. The Dutch made awful drawings that had the parts correct, and the Indonesians made beautiful drawings but had no idea about the parts. And the Chinese were the only ones who had both.
Got it. So you were working there until, at what year were you conscripted in the Dutch Indonesian Army?
I think about a week after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
So it'd be the end of 41?
December, I mean, because, they claimed that Indonesia was the first one to declare war on Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's true.
So, and then how soon after you were conscripted were you captured by the Japanese?
It took all of about 4 months.
Mm-hmm. So would it be like spring of 42?
Yes.
Okay. So getting up to, let's say, what was happening in Europe and your experience in Holland during that time up to about the same period,
1942, yeah.
the first
Well,
year and a half that you were separated.
Well, in the beginning, I always remember we were going back from the place where we had evacuated to, went back to our own address, and we were on bicycles, my brothers and I, and we passed through the center of town, and the most fancy hotel had some very short, fat people in very strange uniforms standing in front, and we knew that it was true. You know, they were the Dutch officers.
The Dutch officers?
The German
officers.
The German, Deutsch, yeah. And when we came in front of our house, there was a canal, and under the trees alongside the canal were the tanks waiting.
Mm.
But in the beginning, nothing very much worked. Was all that frightening, except the first thing they did, the Germans said that everybody had to have an identity card with a picture, and if you were a Jew, it had to have a big J on it. Now, that depended really on the people themselves declaring themselves to be Jewish. And especially in big cities where people didn't know each other, there were people who never declared themselves. And not everybody looked particularly Jewish. But Leo's parents did declare themselves because everybody knew they were Jewish. And in the beginning, nothing very much happened. And then they started firing the Jewish workers. And Leo's father, who was a teacher, was fired. And he took it very, very hard. He had the age to be retired, so
Mm-hmm.
it was an early retirement, but it was very difficult.
And did he die shortly after that, or
No, about 2 years later he
when
died.
did he die?
He died, I think, in 42. Yeah, I think it was, well, yeah, he died in 42, I
Mhm.
think. He died of a heart attack
Mm-hmm.
His birthday.
on his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very traumatic, except your mother, Leo, and had together, you could still travel as a Jew, but you needed permission to do that. They had traveled to Bussum to be at the birthday of your uncle there, so that the night of the birthday he died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and your aunt was very much put upon, because your uncle had had a heart attack, but he survived for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And
So, and then in the so before that, when he got fired from his position, what else? The medical school, the university was closed.
no,
Or
the
not yet?
university, well, the University of Leiden was closed because there the students protested against the firing of their Dutch professors, and the university was closed. And eventually a lot of those students moved over to Utrecht.
But Utrecht did not close during the war.
No, well, that came much later.
Oh, okay.
They had wanted, Leiden had put out a call to all the universities and said, let's make it a general strike. But the other universities said, well, it didn't happen here, so they didn't strike, and Leiden was, the only one that did. And, well, the interesting thing is that there were people, political giants in Holland, who had made up their mind and said, this is what it's going to be, and it's not going to change, and we might as well, start cooperating. And I mean, it would last into eternity.
They didn't have any sense that there would even be some sort of liberation, or this was.
No, Germany was a very mighty,
Mm-hmm.
and they conquered one country after another, like Holland and Denmark and Sweden,
Mm-hmm.
and but the Dutch by and large wouldn't take that. They said no, we will eventually be liberated. But there was also a large group of Dutch National Socialists, and they came out of the woodwork because they were very unpopular, and they, took over a lot of the official jobs. And the thing was that the Germans went very, very slowly. First, the Jews had to observe a curfew. They had to be, they couldn't be outside after 8 o'clock, and the non-Jews could. Well, later nobody could anymore. And from one thing came another, and within 2 years they started deporting Jewish people. First, they tried to get all of them to go to Amsterdam, so there would be a very large ghetto there.
Well, what year are we talking about? Is it still 42?
42.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And 41, 42.
Yeah.
And by that time, there was a misunderstanding really in Holland. They thought that the Jews were picked up to go to work camps, because that's what the rumor was. But they were not work camps.
Mm-hmm.
Some were just camps to keep them, and others were camps to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really not generally known, at least we got this illegal, there was immediately illegal newspapers started bringing up that took the news that England sent. Everybody had to, who had the radio had to hand it in. Also, I think we also had to hand in silverware and stuff like that.
Anything of value, or
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And I think I remember we took our copper vases and dug a hole somewhere and put them in. Of course, we never found them back.
So, but were you still going to university then
yeah,
throughout
it was
that
still
period?
open.
And your brothers were also,
No, one brother was still in high school.
but they hadn't
No,
gone
they-
into hiding or anything yet.
No, there was no hiding. And I think in 43, the students there were a lot of illegal workers among the students. And all of a sudden, and this was during a vacation, I think Easter vacation or something. I'm not sure just what vacation it was, but there was suddenly, all students got a letter that because of this unpatriotic and selfish conduct, every student had to sign a loyalty oath. And of course everybody said, loyalty oath, what loyalty oath, let's sign it and forget about it. But the student organizations decided that we should not sign it. And they sent people around on bicycles to the addresses of the students, and my brother and I got one of those people and said, we're not signing. So we didn't sign, and then a couple of weeks later, my brother got a notice that he was a traitor and a parasite, and he should pack a little suitcase and go to the station.
This is your older brother.
My younger brother at that time was living in Gouda, I think, because he was studying, they had this large gardening center, he was working there.
So,
and it was, sufficiently parasitical.
so, but Ed had to report to the
Ed
station.
had to report, and he packed his little suitcase, and he sat on a chair, and he put the suitcase down and said, I'm not going. And well, from then on, he had to hide, and we had an attic, and we arranged for a place there that everybody would have found him, of course, but there was a wall, and he could go behind the wall.
Did they ever come to look for him?
No. Well, I think once a soldier came into the building, mostly old people lived there, to see if there were people who were in hiding, but my brother was upstairs and they didn't go that far.
What do you think, were there some people who did report to the
Yes,
individual,
they did.
and what happened to them?
What happened to them, they were transported to Germany and had to work. And
So they really went to work camps as opposed to the Jews who were sent.
Well, actually, they did need workers because there were so many soldiers, and I had fellow students who had very little clinical experience. I think they had seen patients being demonstrated, but they had never been on the wards. And they had to be heading wards
in Germany.
In Germany, and then later, when they came back, they were they were punished for having done that, which I think was exceedingly unfair.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically something they could not go to class for 4 weeks or something, but it was a very unfair thing. And then,
Well,
no, that was after the war.
when they came back.
They came back.
Yeah.
But basically, the universities stopped teaching.
Mm-hmm. At about when did they stop teaching? At 42, 43?
43.
Mm-hmm. And then, so when you were captured by the Japanese,
Well, so I was.
well, and how did that actually happen? What?
It was interesting. We had a little bit of training. I was pretty good shooting with a rifle. My rifle was built in 1898, and but I could shoot with it. So they gave me a choice, and I wanted a Tommy gun, but they didn't have that, so I got a machine gun. But it was too expensive to shoot with it, so I could take it apart and put it together, but I never shot. So then we were sent to what was supposed to be the front in Tanjung Priok. It's the harbor of Jakarta. Then it was Batavia. So we were there, and we had a pillbox built by the Japanese, and a couple of people, including me, said we should find out how you put that ribbon of bullets into the machine gun, and then we'll take it out again. So we did that. That looked okay. We took it out, and while we were talking, one of us, I don't know, it could have been me, pushed a button, and we didn't realize that with that action we had pushed one bullet into the barrel of the machine gun. So we fired a single shot, and we could hear the bullet screaming away over the fish ponds of the harbor, and that was it. Then our captain, who was actually a physics teacher, came on his bicycle while we were lying on the ground making jokes. We were laughing a lot. I don't know why. And he said we should get up immediately, get dressed, because they had been shooting already.
Which was you?
Yes, I said, oh wow, well. A little after that, we were told to get into a truck, and we are taken to a station and in a train to Bandung, which is in the mountains. And when we got there, we were told you had surrendered, and I had to put a white handkerchief around my arm. They got the bullets out of our guns and stand guard. Now, we had been told that nothing to worry about the Japanese, because they were small and bow-legged, and they wear glasses, and they couldn't see very well. So I stood guard there, and it was raining very heavily, and I heard somebody mumbling, "Ichni, Ichni." It was a 6-foot-tall Japanese without glasses passing by. Well, and from there it went downhill.
So you were in prison camp first in Indonesia,
In Bandung,
in
and then from Bandung we were taken to Cilacap, where I developed a taste for crème brûlée, because we were cleaning up the harbor, and there was this pile of cans of condensed milk that was hit by a bomb, and they were converted to caramel.
Mm-hmm.
Delicious. It was a set of coffins, and we hid them in the coffins, and once in a while we dug into a coffin and ate some.
Mm.
Anyway, from there we went to a camp in Cimahi, near Bandung, which was a good camp because the camp commander had a relationship with an Indonesian girl whose father was the provider and all that. I should add, I think that in Cilacap, we had a camp commander who gave a speech on Christmas, and he told us he had started reading the Bible and was certainly moved by the fact that the Jews were chased all over the world. Then we, at New Year, we got a notice from Tokyo that thanks to the Jews and the Freemasons, the war was still going on. So much for that. Well, then from Chimay we went to, we were taken to the coast, and we stayed in Jakarta for overnight, and we were put on a ship and taken to Singapore. And Changi was a good-looking camp. We didn't have the stuff we had in Chimay, where people had built a stage, and one of the boys was good-looking and dressed as a woman, and they had a cabaret and all that. But we even had a cabaret in Cilacap. I had gone to that, and when I came out, it was extremely quiet in the camp. And I said, "What's going on?" And they told me to shut up. And then I found out that there had been an execution. 3 boys had tried to escape, and one of them was stupid enough to have a revolver with him. So they were bayoneted in public.
Mm.
I missed that. Anyway, so we, from Changi, we were put in a boat and taken on a long trip, packed in the bottom hold of the ship. There was a kind of an outhouse that was hanging over the edge of the ship,
Mhm.
and I went there when there was some shooting, and I looked and I saw that one ship seems to be hit, and there was rowboats with people in it coming our way, and it turned out to be, those are women, I think, who were on that other ship, and
Mhm.
but anyway, eventually we got to
But
Osaka.
what happened to those women?
Well, they stayed on board with us.
Oh, so
But
they were picked
hidden.
up.
I'm sure they had a better lodging.
But what kind of women were they? Were they? I mean, what,
Japanese.
they were Japanese.
But they were born by Chinese.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If they hadn't been Japanese, they probably wouldn't have been picked up. You
No.
think?
Well, in Osaka, I worked in the dry docks, repairing. Well, not repairing. There were these ships brought in, and then we had to carry poles to support the ship along the edges, and that water was then pumped out, and we had to clean the dry dock. We scraped off the barnacles and threw them out, and other prisoners got very mad. They were Koreans, and they ate barnacles.
Oh. So your fellow prisoners were from what? Many other countries.
We in Osaka we were together with British merchant marines who happened to be in Osaka when the war broke out. So the very early prisoner of war. And we were under a British Henshaw who was a little bit like the bridge over.
Oh, Alec Guinness and the.
Yes, he said, "Come on, boys, let's show these Japs what we can do." And he forgot that we were working for the enemy, of course. He wanted to be good. Well, he often believed that we would get time off if we did well and that sort of stuff. And then I got pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
Won't you talk about the hallucination and that sort of
Well, I think.
We are now in close to 44.
Mm-hmm. I think Well, there's a very interesting story you tell of how you learned that
Oh
that
yes.
the end the end of the war was coming. But I'd like to bring that up. But also, well, if you tell that, and then I want to bring something else up.
Yeah. Well, first I'll tell that I got pneumonia, and I realized because I woke up and I felt I didn't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's suspicious, I must have pneumonia, and I did. And so my buddy took me to the doctor, and I had 101, I think, and the doctor said, has to go to work, because it's a Japanese rule. And my friend said, but it has pneumonia. Yes, I know, it's a Dutch doctor. And the Japanese guy was watching, said, no, only got a, I want to know what was going on, and they told him I could stay. So they put me on a bed in the sick barracks, and right after that the whole barracks disappeared. It was night, I was on a hill, and on top of the hill was a house with stained glass windows. One piece was missing, and a very old Chinese was looking out, trying to see me. I wasn't sure he did see me, and two kids in colorful Japanese clothes were walking off to the left downhill. And then it all disappeared, and I was back in the barracks, and there was the face of the medical attendant quite near
Mm-hmm.
me to see if I was really dying, and I wasn't. Well, I think I should add that 2 years ago I had a dream. I was in China at a railroad station, and there were very long rails, and there was a middle-aged Chinese man sitting on a bench. So I said, does this train go to A or something? And he said, yes it does, but there's nothing left for you there. I said, how about the house? No, the house is gone. And he said, I'm sure the old man died. Oh yeah, he was dying already when you saw him. And he said, yes, but why did you walk off then? And I said, we were going for medicine, but it was too late.
Hmm.
So that kind of, I was wondering if this old man was my hallucination or I was his.
Yeah. Let's take a little bit of a break now, and then we can pick this up again in a few minutes.